rise to the grave?
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ms. Arias, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, you may cross-examine the witness.
Ma'am, take a look at Exhibit 413. You recognize that exhibit, correct?
Yes.
And that's a picture of you, correct?
Yes.
Right here. And the other one is a picture of your dumb sister, Angela, correct?
That's my sister. She's not dumb.
Well, do you remember having a conversation with Travis Alexander back on May 10th of 2008?
Yes.
And do you remember that you tape recorded that conversation?
Yes.
And during that conversation, isn't it true that you said, but I honestly think, talking about Angela, she's a little bit dumb. You said that, right?
Yes, I called her dumb and stupid.
Did I ask you whether or not you called her stupid, ma'am?
No.
I asked you whether or not you called her dumb, right?
Yes.
Ma'am, take a look at Exhibit 452. Do you recognize the two people there?
Yes.
And this photograph was taken by your camera, correct?
It looks like it.
Well, when you say it looks like it, isn't it part of the same photographs that are involved in Exhibit 413?
I think it is.
Well, Exhibit number 413, that was taken on May 10th, we'll bring it in, of 2008, right?
Yes.
And this photograph here, Exhibit number 413, features the color of your hair, doesn't it?
Yes.
Exhibit 452 also features the color of your hair, doesn't it?
Yes, a different part of my hair.
And this was taken sometime in May of 2008, correct?
This exhibit?
No, exhibit number 452.
I only remember it was the spring, I think.
Of 2008?
Yes.
I move for the admission of exhibit 452.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Counsel approach. Four 52 is admitted.
Ma'am, take a look at the back of exhibit 452. It contains a date on there. Does that date refresh your recollection as to when this photograph was taken?
Yes.
And what date was this photograph taken?
5 days later, the 15th of May, 2008.
And with regard to this photograph, It also features you. And it also features your sister, the one that you also said was stupid, correct?
Yes.
Now, with regard to this name calling, one of the things that we heard through a text message was that you were upset at some point because Mr. Alexander said that you were going to turn out like your mother, or you were acting like your mother. Do you remember that text message, man?
Yes.
And in that text message, there was this indication that somehow he was saying something bad about your mother, right?
Yes.
And when you testified, you seemed to get pretty upset about that, right?
I remember getting emotional.
And you indicated that you loved your mother, right?
I do love my mother, yes.
Did you or did you not indicate that you loved your mother? I'm not asking you if you love your mother. I'm asking you if you indicated it.
I don't remember.
Do you have problems with your memory, ma'am?
Sometimes.
So you can tell us, for example, what kind of coffee you bought at Starbucks back on June 3rd of 2008, but you can't tell us what you said yesterday or the day before?
I always got the same drink at Starbucks.
And you can tell us, for example, what type of sex you had with Mr. Alexander many years ago, but you're having trouble telling us what you said a couple of days ago?
When I'm under stress, yeah, it affects my memory.
I thought you said the relationship with Mr. Alexander was very stressful.
Some of the sex wasn't.
Pardon?
Some of the sex wasn't.
So you did enjoy the sex then, is that what you're telling me?
At times I did.
But you did indicate at some point that, as part of your examination, also that Mr. Alexander at some point said something about your grandparents also. Do you remember telling us that?
My grandfather.
Right. That he made some pejorative comment or some bad comment about him, right?
Yes, his name.
Right. And one of the things that seems to be coming out here is that you seem to have a double standard here with regard to making comments about people, don't you?
Yes, I do. I do.
And in fact, it's okay for you to make comments about, for example, Angela and call her dumb and stupid, right?
No,
Well, but you said it, right?
I did.
And we heard on the telephone conversation that you were laughing when you said that, right?
Yeah, it was sentimental, kind of.
You were laughing. You weren't upset when you said it, were you?
No.
And then when Mr. Alexander says something like, you're going to be like your mother, that's when you get emotional and upset, right?
I did.
And that's when you get upset when he says something about your grandfather, right?
That night I was upset.
And, well, you did get upset, yes or no?
No, because I was already upset.
Well, you didn't get upset on the witness stand when you told us about
Oh,
that?
yeah, on the witness stand, certainly.
And so it just seems that it's okay unless it's okay to say these things unless it's Mr. Alexander that's saying them, right? So
No,
you're
that's
applying
not
a
what I'm
different
saying.
standard to Mr. Alexander, correct?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
And ma'am, one of the other things that we know with regard to this standard applying and that sort of thing is back yesterday, as a matter of fact, you told us that back in August of 2007, you went over to Mr. Alexander's house. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
And you remember telling us that at that time, you were broken up with Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes, I'd broken up with him.
Well, you'd broken up with him or he'd broken up with you? One of the two, right?
I broke up with him
All right.
about a month
And
before.
you broke up with him on June 29th of 2007, right?
Yes.
But you felt that it was okay for you to go over to his house in August of 2007, didn't you?
After he told me, yes.
Yes or no? Did you feel it was okay to go over to his house?
I said yes.
And when you went over to his house, you indicated that you knocked or you did something and that nobody came to the door, right?
I went to his house a lot in August, so it depends on the
Ma'am,
incident
I'm
you're
talking
referring
about the
to.
incident that you told us about yesterday. Do you remember the one that you related that involved the killing? Do you remember telling us about that?
I did not knock.
And you did go over there, and at some point you started to peep in to the house, didn't you?
Yes.
So that means that you don't know if you knocked, though, right?
I did not knock. I know I did not.
So you went around the back then to look, right?
I went around the back to get in.
You went around the back then, right?
Yes.
And when you went around the back, you're telling us you went around the back to get in, right?
Yes.
But when you got to the back to get in, you started to look at what was going on, right?
I glanced in as I was walking to the sliding glass door.
You did walk in and you were looking at what was going on, right?
I did not walk in.
Then you were from outside looking in, right?
Yes.
Never went in, right?
No, I ran out of the backyard.
You never went in, yes or no?
I said no.
And when you went and looked, you saw something that upset you, right?
Yes.
You saw Mr. Alexander, right?
I didn't know it was him at first,
Yes
but
or
yes,
no? Did
that
you
was
see him during that encounter?
Objection, she's answering the question.
Overruled.
I did. I said no.
Pardon?
I didn't know it was him at first.
You didn't see him when you were there that night?
I did afterward, yes.
That night, ma'am, listen to my question. That night, did you see Mr. Alexander inside that house? Yes or no?
Yes.
And inside that house, there was a female, right?
Yes.
What's the name of the female?
He didn't tell me her name.
I'm asking that. Did I ask you if he told you the name?
No.
So, did you recognize her?
No, I did not.
And he was there with the female, though. You were able to see her face, though, right?
Yes, sort of.
Well, yes or sort of means two different things. Yes or no? Were you able to see her face or not?
Part of it was shadowed from the
Yes or
TV
no, ma'am?
behind her, so I
Ma'am,
saw part of it.
Judge, she's not answering my question. If you can instruct her.
Ms. Arias, listen carefully to the question and answer only the question you are asked.
Okay.
You may continue.
Could you see her face? Yes or no?
Part of it.
But you were able to see that they were making out, right?
Oh, yeah, they were.
And so is that a yes? They were making out, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
And part of what you also saw was that her brassiere was off, right?
I did not see that. I just saw her rehook her bra.
Pardon?
I didn't see it all the way off. It just saw her
You
rehook.
indicated that you saw her hooking the brassiere back on, right? You
She
told
was
us that
rehooking
yesterday,
it.
yes?
She was rehooking it, yes.
So you did tell us that yesterday, right?
Yes.
So that means that at least that her bra was unhooked, right?
It was unhooked.
And you stood there and they stood up in reaction to something that you did? Is that what you're telling us?
No,
They didn't see you.
they didn't see me.
But you saw, so what happened then is you actually were watching what they were doing then, right?
Briefly, yes.
Did I ask you for how long, ma'am?
No,
I asked you if you stood there and watched them, right?
no.
You didn't stand there and watch them?
I didn't stand there. I saw it and then I turned and ran out of the
So
backyard.
but you saw enough to know that they were kissing, right?
Yes.
You used the term making out, didn't you, yesterday?
Yes.
You were there long enough to see that one of the individuals was Mr. Alexander, not his roommates, right?
Yes.
You were able to see that it was a female, right?
Yes.
You were able to see that the bra was unhooked, right?
Yes.
And the lights weren't on, right?
There was a light.
Well, didn't you indicate that it was like a TV kind of light?
That
you saw?
light. Yes.
Right? So there was no light, there was a television that was on, right?
That's light.
Ma'am, was it a light or was it a television that was on?
It was light from a television screen.
So are you saying that it was the television that was on then?
Yes.
And from that light, you were able to make all of this out, correct?
Yes.
No other light was on, right?
Not that I recall.
And then you decided to leave, right?
Yes.
And this was at the point that you were living very close to Mr. Alexander, right?
No.
Well, you were living within 10 miles of him, weren't you?
I was living by Greenfield and Broadway. I don't know the length.
How long would it take you to drive that?
About 15 minutes, depending on traffic.
And after you saw this, one of the things that you did was that you took off, right?
Yes.
And then you thought about it, right?
Of course. Mhm.
And you felt strongly enough about this that the next day you called your father, right?
I called my parents' house and my dad
Yes or
answered.
no, you spoke to your father.
I did speak to him.
And you were crying, right?
Yes.
And you were upset about this, right?
Yes.
And you told him why you were upset, right?
Yes.
I thought you said before that you didn't discuss these issues involving you and Mr. Alexander.
Not typically.
Not typically. You said you didn't yesterday and all the days before. You remember telling us that?
The violence, yes.
Oh, I see. So, but you did discuss the fact that you saw him kissing with somebody else with your father, right?
Yes,
And as a result of that, you decided to go talk to Mr. Alexander about it, right?
yes.
What in the world gave you the right to go talk to an ex-boyfriend with who, according to you, you'd broken up with? What right do you have to do that?
Objection, Your Honor, so argumentative.
Sustained.
Ma'am, did you feel that you could go and talk to him about that?
Of course.
Why? Weren't you broken up?
Yes.
You were being territorial about him, weren't you?
No.
Oh, you weren't? Then why in the world would you even care what he was doing?
Because he was trying to court me back.
That's you telling us that he was trying to court you back. If he's trying to court you back, you could have just walked away at that point, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could have at any time, I guess.
Well, at that point, you could have walked away, right?
Yes.
You didn't need him for his paycheck, right? Because he wasn't giving you money, right?
He was giving me money.
Well, that was for some work, but you could have gotten other work, right?
I guess I could have looked.
You guess. You worked at other places. You know you could have gotten other work, couldn't you?
Not in August. It's a very slow season for restaurants.
So you're saying that you were restricted in only getting work at restaurants, that there's no other kind of work that you could get?
Restaurants is,
Yes or no?
I guess that would be no, but I hadn't thought about it.
So then, in addition to that, you were living in your own place, right?
No.
Well, you were living with Mr. Alexander?
No.
You were living elsewhere, weren't you?
Yes.
You were living in another place, right?
Yes.
Where you were paying rent, right?
No.
You weren't paying any rent at all.
Not with Rachel.
So, in other words, it was even better for you. You didn't even have to worry about having to pay the rent then, right?
Yes.
And so, you could have just let that situation alone, but you decided to confront him anyway, right?
Of course.
And the reason that you did it is because you were jealous, right?
No.
And then you did talk to him about this issue, correct?
Yes.
And he got upset with you, right?
No.
He didn't get upset and scream and run upstairs? Isn't that what you told us yesterday?
Yes, he did.
So, ma'am, to go back to this issue involving the text messages, one of the things that you told us was that there was a text message that you sent to somebody by the name of Steve Carroll, right?
Yes.
And that it was a two-part text message, right?
Yes.
In this two-part text message, one part ended up going to Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes.
And that he got upset about it, right?
Very yes.
And after he got upset about it, one of the things that he wanted was to see the second part of this text message, right?
Yes.
And so you lied to him at that point, right?
No.
Well, you fabricated a second text message, didn't you?
After that point, yes.
So, are you telling me that fabricating a text message is not a lie?
No, I'm not saying that.
So you did lie to him, Mr. Alexander, right?
Objection, ask and answer.
Yes and no.
So you think that sending him that text message and telling him this is the second part of the text message, that that's not a lie even though you fabricated it?
That part was the lie.
And so you then were asked the question, well, how did that make you feel when Mr. Alexander was sending you these text messages involving Mr. Carroll? Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
We're applying a different standard here then, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
With regard to this issue of how you feel, isn't that the same way that you felt when you were peeping in his window in August of 2007? Isn't that the same kind of feeling that you were having
The same as what?
as the one involving Steve Carroll?
I don't know.
You were mad at Mr. Alexander both times, weren't you?
I wasn't mad at Alexander.
You weren't mad at him, or you were upset with him then, right?
At what time?
Either time.
Steve, Carol, no. The girl from Phoenix, yes.
And so it just seems that it's okay for you to lie to him about a guy, but when it comes to him being with some other girl, you decide to confront him, right?
Yes.
And one of the other things that you told us yesterday was that you were monogamous with Mr. Alexander, right?
Sexually monogamous, yes.
Ma'am, you told us you were monogamous, and that's what monogamous means, sexually, doesn't it?
I think it means more than that sometimes.
Well, in this case, monogamous means sexually, doesn't it?
Objection, mischaracterizes her testimony.
Restate your question.
When you say monogamous, it means sexually, doesn't it?
Which time?
The time that we're talking about right now, involving Mr. Alexander, no other time.
Our relationship evolved, so...
I'm not asking you if it evolved. At the end, right when you killed him, you indicated that you were monogamous with him, right?
Yes.
And at that time, you then left the killing scene, if you will, and you went up to Utah, right?
Yes.
And when you went up to Utah, ma'am, you ended up with somebody by the name of Brian Burns, right?
Yes.
And you ended up in his bed, right?
I think it was a love sack.
Okay, and with regard to at that point, according to you, Mr. Alexander still wasn't dead, was he?
It wasn't discussed.
Well, did I ask you whether or not you discussed it with Mr. Burns? I didn't, did I?
I wasn't talking about Mr. Burns.
I'm asking you at that time, didn't you tell us yesterday, at the time that you went up to Utah, you weren't sure if he was dead? Do you remember telling us that?
Not in Utah, from the Hoover Dam, or right before the checkpoint.
So when did you know that he was dead? Tell me that.
Well, I got confirmation of it on June 10th, but
So, okay, if you got confirmation on June 10th, you met with Mr. Burns, what, before June 10th, didn't you?
yes.
You met him on the 5th, right?
Yes.
And so at that point, you didn't know, according to your own story, that Mr. Alexander was dead, right?
I guess I knew. I wasn't accepting it.
You either knew or you didn't. Which one is it, ma'am? Make up your mind, please.
Objection, ask and answer.
Ask another question.
Did you know he was dead when you were Mr. Burns and he were kissing?
Objection, ask and answer. This is the same
Overruled.
question.
Overruled.
Yeah, I think I did.
You think you did, but you're not sure at that point.
I wasn't really in my own mind. I was out of my mind, sort of.
So if you didn't think he was dead, if that portion of you didn't think he was dead, then it's okay for you, at that point, if you didn't think he was dead, to sort of roll around with Mr. Alexander then, with Mr. Burns. Then that was okay, right?
I'm single.
Right? Just like he was on August 7th of 2000, on August 8th of 2000, in August of 2007, right?
Yes.
So it's okay for you, then it should be okay for him, right?
It was okay,
Then why did you confront him the next day if it was okay?
because he was still courting me. I wanted to know where I stood.
And so because of he was still, your definition, courting you, you felt that you deserved an explanation, right?
Yes.
Hadn't you just had intercourse with Mr. Alexander on the 4th of June?
Yes.
And if he was still alive, he would have deserved an explanation then for you being with Mr. Burns, right?
No.
Well, no, aren't we? You're applying a different standard here, aren't you?
No.
You're saying, one, it's okay for you to confront him about the situation, but not okay for Mr. Alexander to confront you, right?
If he wanted to confront me, it would have been okay.
Ma'am, with regard to the exhibit number 452, it does show you, right? Correct?
Yes.
And it shows again Angela, correct?
Yes.
Shows something else on there though, doesn't it? Doesn't it show your hand?
Yes.
And in fact, let me show you another close-up of that hand.
You're going to object to foundation.
Please approach.
453, and then also take a look at Exhibit 452. Exhibit 453 is a close-up of your hand, right?
Yes.
And then you can also see the jewelry around your sister's neck. in
Yes.
Exhibit 453, correct?
Yes.
And you previously have told us about Exhibit 452 and when it was taken and who's in that photograph, correct?
Yes.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 453.
No objection.
And ma'am, this was also taken, according to your testimony, on May 15th. Let's take a look at that, of 2008. That's a picture of your left hand, isn't it?
Yes.
And that shows your ring finger, right?
Yes.
Do you remember that you testified that on January 22nd of 2008, you and Mr. Alexander were involved in some sort of violent encounter? Do you remember telling us about that?
Yes.
And you told us that during that encounter, he threw you down. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And while you were down, that he kicked you, right?
Yes.
And when he kicked you, ma'am, one of the things that happened was that you put up your left hand. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes, both hands.
Well, you told us specifically about your left hand, right?
Yes.
And when you went to put up your left hand, according to you, he kicked you and he damaged your ring finger on the left hand, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you even held it up for us, didn't you?
Yes.
And it was crooked when you showed it to us, wasn't it?
It's bent. Yes.
It's bent. Show us how bent it is again, ma'am. It's higher so we can see it sideways. Ma'am, if he caused that damage on January 22nd of 2008, that would have been before this picture that we have here, which is exhibit number 453. It would have been about 5 months before that, right?
It was before that.
5 months, right?
4.
4 months then, right?
Yes.
You don't have a bent finger here in exhibit 453, do you?
My finger is bent there.
You're saying that your finger is bent there.
Yes. Just
Hold
the
up your
same.
finger again. Sideways so we could also see it.
When my fingers are straightened, this one stays
And
bent.
that's what it looks like, your finger. And you're saying that's what happened on January 22nd of 2008, right?
Yes.
Ma'am, one of the other things involving this particular finger, it seems to have had its run, if you will, of bad things happen to it, right?
This finger?
Yes, the left ring finger.
I don't know.
Well, you talked to Ryan Burns about it, didn't you?
Yes.
And you told him that that finger, the left ring finger, had been damaged, right? Injured, didn't you?
I don't know if it was the left.
You don't remember telling him it was the left ring finger, man?
No.
Do you have a problem with memory?
Occasionally.
And so, some of the things that you've told us, for example, then, about other things in the past, you may have also had problems with your memory then, right?
Yes.
And so, whatever you told us in the past is somewhat suspect then, because your memory may be lacking.
Objection, argumentative.
I only told things I remember clearly that are crystallized in my mind.
With regard to Mr. Burns, you do remember who he was, right?
Yes.
And you do remember that you went over to West Jordan to meet him, right?
Yes.
And you do remember that you did meet him that Thursday, and it was sometime around 11 o'clock in the morning, right?
I think so, yes.
And when you met him, you guys decided to go somewhere to a restaurant for some sort of business meeting, right?
Yes.
And during that time, didn't you have a bandage on your finger?
Yes.
And it was your left finger, wasn't it?
No.
It was your right finger then, right? Is that what you're saying, it was your right finger?
It was 2 right fingers.
So it was your right finger then, right? Ma'am, are you sure that it was your right finger?
It was 2.
Pardon?
2 right fingers.
Do you remember then that you had a conversation with Detective Flores about this issue involving the finger?
Yes.
And do you remember that that was on July 16th of 2008?
Yes.
And do you remember that you told him that on June 4th you had been over at Mr. Alexander's home, right?
Yes.
And you told him that you were over at Mr. Alexander's home and that some guy and some girl had come in, right?
Yes.
And during whatever happened on June 4th, you told Detective Flores that it was your left finger that had been damaged. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So you did tell that to the detective that it happened on June 4th, right?
Yes.
Does that then refresh your recollection, and we'll play it so that we know what we're talking about?
Objection, she's already been into it.
We moved it in, not for impeachment purposes, just move it in, state versus Atwood.
Approach from counsel.
.454 is admitted.
when she cut me.
Where at?
My hand.
Let me see. Where at?
You
Can you
actually
show
can't
me?
see it. If you look at my finger isn't the same now. I was
Let me
really,
see. Where did I get cut?
it was conveniently it was right on the crease.
Right there on the crease.
Can you see? Oh, it's kind of in purple color, I
This
guess.
one here, right
Compared
there.
to this.
Yeah, right on the crease.
Oh, there's a vein on this one, maybe. I don't know.
Is this one here?
Yeah.
It's a little slice there.
Yeah.
Just a small one? Or was it pretty deep?
I don't know how deep it was, but my finger hurt for a while.
Okay, so like right in that crease that you, right, across both of them?
Not my middle finger. It cut this one a little, but not as much. This is where it really went. I don't know how it happened that all these other fingers were missed, but this one, maybe that, I don't know. This one, like I still can't close this finger all the way. It's as close as it goes. Whereas this one goes like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my CTR ring used to fit both fingers, and I can't get it on this finger anymore.
So that cut pretty deep then?
I guess if you feel it, squeeze it, it just feels like bone, like there's nothing abnormal there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like my CTR ring slides right on this finger, and it used to slide right in off this finger, and I just can't fit a ring on here.
Okay.
It's a bigger size now.
What about this hair? What's that from?
That's my cat.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. She scratches me a lot.
That tape, or that videotape, right?
Yes.
And that's you having the conversation discussing the left ring finger, right?
Yes.
And you demonstrated to Detective Flores that left ring finger, right?
Yes.
And you told him that this woman, during this attack on June 4th of 2008, cut you right there, didn't you?
Yes.
And you showed him, and the finger, if we look at it there, had the same aspect or had the same angle to it that your finger does now, doesn't it?
Yes.
Ma'am, the injury to your finger happened on June 4th, 2008, not January 22nd of 2008, did it?
That's not correct.
Ma'am, with regard to the story involving this particular issue, you told us that it happened on January 22nd of 2008, right?
Which issue?
The left ring finger.
Yes.
You then discussed it, or there was this issue with Ryan Burns, right?
Which issue?
The cut finger.
The cut finger, yes.
And
Two
then
cut fingers.
on July 16th of 2008, you discussed it with Detective Flores, right?
Yes.
One of the things that you told Mr. Burns was that you cut it at Margaritaville while you were working there, right?
No, I did not say
You never
that.
told him that then, right?
I said at work.
So you never told him Margaritaville then, right?
No, he said that.
Right, but you never told him that you cut it at Margaritaville, right?
No.
You told him that you cut it at work then, right?
Yes.
And then when you spoke to Detective Flores, you gave him a different story. You didn't say that it was cut at work. You told him that it was cut some other way, right?
Yes.
And then you testified about it in this court, right?
Yes.
And you gave us another story of how this happened, right?
No.
Well, do you remember that you testified that you were at Mr. Alexander's home on June 4th of 2008 at the sink? Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
And do you remember telling us that you dropped the glass in Mr. Alexander's house?
June 4th?
Whatever date you were there at Mr. Alexander's house.
I broke more than one glass at his house.
Ma'am, do you remember testifying yesterday about how you suffered this injury to your finger? Yes or no?
Not this finger.
No? Do you remember testifying that involving your finger, your left ring finger, yesterday, as a matter of fact, that was cut when you dropped the glass when you were at Mr. Alexander's house on the day that you killed him?
I did not indicate my left finger. I said my
Oh, so
finger.
you were saying it was your right finger that you cut in Mr. Alexander's house then, right?
It was my right finger, yes.
So, throughout this whole thing, Mr. Burns, when he indicated what finger it was, he was mistaken. Well, not he was mistaken. You're saying you never told Mr. Burns that it was the right finger that you cut, right?
We didn't discuss which hand.
Okay, so you never indicated to him in any way, shape, or form that it was the right finger?
Objection, ask and answer.
Sustained.
And this issue of the 22nd of January 22nd, when you injured, when you say that you were injured, you kept a journal, didn't you? You kept the journal, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't write in it all the time, but you wrote in it some of the time, right?
Frequently, yes.
Frequently. And you were writing about what was going on in your life back in January of 2008, right?
Yes.
And you would write about things that were significant to you, right?
Some things.
Right. And in fact, with regard to this particular journal, you knew that you could almost write anything that you wanted in it because it was going to stay private, right?
No.
Well, ma'am, let me show you, or let me mark one of them as an exhibit. Take a look at exhibit 242.001. You recognize it?
Yes, I do.
And that's your journal, right?
Sure is.
Okay, that's that. Take a look at the entry, and just read it to yourself, on Sunday, August 26th of '07.
The whole entry?
Just read the first 5 lines. 6 lines.
Yes.
You wrote that, right?
Yes.
Take a look at exhibit number 455. Is this a true and accurate copy of those 5 or 6 lines?
Yes.
And you wrote that back on August 26th of '07, right?
Yes.
Let me have that back, please. Move for the admission of exhibit number 4.
You may.
455 is admitted.
Take a look at all entries on Sunday, August 26th, 07, and I'm reading it, let me know.
Just this one entry.
Yes, just that one entry of August 26th of 07.
Okay.
I know you have two entries, but the first entry is the one we're talking about.
Yeah, it looks like I have 3 on that day.
So have you read the first entry that involves this particular snippet?
Yes.
Thank you.
Objection, Your Honor, let's recall entries before answering the questions from August.
Overruled.
This journal and your journals were meant to be private, right?
Yes.
And that's what it says there. Well, I guess it's a good thing that nobody else reads this, because I write right now that I love Travis Victor Alexander so completely that I don't know any other way to be, correct? That's what it says.
Yes.
Do you remember when we started talking this morning that we talked about an incident where you went over to his house?
Yes.
And this was the incident that you referenced involving the killing, right? That it went through your head, right?
You're talking about the incident in August 2007?
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And that incident in August of 2007, where you went over and peeked inside of his house, happened before this entry here of Sunday, August 26th of 07, right?
Objection, mischaracterizes testimony saying peep.
What was the last thing you said?
He said, by saying peep.
Restate your question.
When you looked inside the house.
Yes, it did happen before this entry.
Right, and so really the reason why you confronted Mr. Alexander was not because he owed you an explanation or anything like that. The reason you confronted him back in August of 2007 was because you were in love with him and you didn't want to let him go, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
That's not right. But I was in love with him.
Yes, you did write this though, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, you kept more than one journal, you kept a number of journals, right?
I kept one journal at a time.
Okay, let's take a look at another journal. recognize it, right?
Yes.
Why don't you open it up and look through it?
Pardon?
2.002. That's your writing in throughout that whole journal, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me hand it back. There is an entry for Thursday, January 24th, 2008, right?
Yes.
Let's just take a look at it. See that?
Yes.
Let me mark another exhibit for you. Take a look at exhibit 456. The exhibit that you have in front of you, that's the whole entry for January 24th of 2008, correct?
I believe it is for this single one, yes.
There are other entries, but that's the complete entry for that one,
Yes.
correct? Because it's written in blue ink, right?
Yes.
And the other ones are written in black ink, right?
Yes, the one following.
Okay. We move to the admission of exhibit number 456.
Do we approach?
And again, take a look at this exhibit number 242002. We talked about the entry of January 24th of 2008. Take a look at this journal. And isn't it true that the previous, in terms of chronological time, that the previous entry is on January 20th of 2008.
Yes,
So there's a gap of 4 days between the time you wrote on January 20th and on January 24th of 2008, right?
yes.
Nothing in between, correct?
Not in the journal.
I'm asking about the journal, ma'am.
That's
Is there
correct.
anything else in front of you?
Ask and answer, Your Honor, and argumentative.
Sustained.
In the journal, ma'am, there are no other entries between January 20th of 2008 and January 24th of 2008, right?
Yes,
If we then take a look at Exhibit 456, let's see what you wrote on Thursday, January 24th of 2008. You wrote, I haven't written because there has been nothing noteworthy to report, correct?
yes,
Didn't you tell us, involving the finger, that this injury to your left finger, when Mr. Alexander went to kick you, that happened on January 22nd of 2008?
yes, it did.
And yet you write here that nothing noteworthy has happened, right?
Yes,
And then you also write that you turned down 4 offers for a date on Friday night, right?
yes,
You were free to date, and so was he, right?
yes,
And then you finish it out by talking about going up to the snow, right? See that?
yes,
You're going to go up there skiing, you crossed it out, and you just are going to go up to the snow, right?
yes.
Did you go skiing?
No, I don't ski.
Pardon?
I don't ski. No, I didn't go.
All right. The entry of January 20th of 2008, take a look at exhibit number 242.002. Count the pages, please.
The pages between the two?
No, just your entry of Sunday, January 20th of 2008. Do you want me to show you where it is
I
here?
have it. It's 4 and a few lines.
And it starts on the lower left-hand corner with 3 lines if you count the date, indicating January 20th of 2008, right?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 5 pages and a few lines.
And in it, one of the things that you talk about is this issue involving Lonnie's baptism, right?
I haven't read it. Can I read it?
Sure, go ahead.
I moved away from Lonnie, so if you want me to finish it, if you're going to ask me about the rest of the entry, I can read the
I'm
rest.
asking you about reading the whole entry of Sunday, June
Okay.
20th of 2008. Go
Okay.
ahead and finish it.
Yes.
It does talk about Lonnie's baptism, right?
Yes.
And previously, when you testified, you indicated that the reason you missed Lonnie's baptism was because you and Mr. Alexander were involved in a sexual liaison, right?
Yes.
And this was a sexual liaison where the Pop Rocks and the Tootsie Pops were involved, right? That's what you said, right?
I'd have to reference dates.
Well, why don't I show you a copy of the transcript then and see if that refreshes your recollection as to what you told us on February 12th.
I would appreciate that.
All right, I will. Starting on page 5. Bottom, read that
Would you like me to read it out loud?
to yourself.
Just the highlighted portion?
Nope, just keep reading it.
Okay. Starting at the bottom, right?
Right.
Remember, we would object to any questions and services for the entire transcript.
That's not illegal. I can respond if you want. It's not a legal basis.
Approach.
Have you read the entire transcript that deals with the sexual encounter involving the Pop Rocks and Tootsie Pops?
Yes, I started where you highlighted and
Well,
finished it.
Read it above it. Does that have anything to do with the Tootsie Pops or the Rock Pops?
Okay,
Does the upper portion have anything to do with it or not?
yes.
Why don't you read the previous page just to make sure that we cover everything involving that particular encounter?
Yes, you can start to be allowed to read the entire transcript.
Granted.
There's nothing about the Pop Rocks on this page.
There is nothing before that, correct?
Yes.
Again, Judge, I'm going to raise the question. She's read the entire transcript. I don't believe she has at this point.
Read the entire transcript.
I think that's the entire transcript.
Irrespective of the date that we're talking about, whether it was January 20th or January 21st or January 22nd, you do reference the Pop Rocks and Tootsie Pops sexual incident by reference to Lonnie's baptism, right?
Yes.
The journal entry of January 20th of 2008 also references Lonnie's baptism, doesn't it? Take a look at
Yes.
Exhibit 458. This is 458.
Yes.
And that's a true and accurate copy in front of you, the excerpt of what's in your journal involving Lonnie's baptism and the sexual encounter, isn't it?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm just referring to the same day in my journal.
Well, let's take a look at it. Let me have that. The first entry is identical on the first page. That indicates Sunday, January 20th, 2008, correct?
Yes, that's when I wrote the entry.
Okay. Then, as we continue on, there is the entry involving the baptism, right? Do you see that? Let's start that entry is there involving Lonnie's baptism.
Yes, I just don't know if I'm referencing the 20th on that part of the entry.
Ma'am, is there any other intervening date between the January 20th of 2008 where we started and the very end where you put JA? Is there any other date in there?
That I did.
Yes or no?
There might be, I haven't.
Well, why don't you take a look? Let's take a look at the first page. first page starts Sunday, January 20th, 2008, doesn't it?
When I wrote it, yes.
Does it start out saying Sunday, January 20th, 2008, yes or no?
Yes.
And isn't it true that it starts out in black ink, right?
Yes.
And then it continues on in blue ink, right?
Yes.
And it flows, doesn't it? It says the words flow from what's at the bottom there to the next page, don't they?
Yes.
So then when we go to the bottom of it, the next page is also in blue ink, right?
Yes.
In the next page, there is no other date reference, is there?
Objection, she says she needs to review it before she can answer the
She's
question.
looking at it.
Overruled. Maybe.
Thank you.
No, no, ma'am. Don't turn the page. I just want you to look at that next page to see if you see a date.
Objection, Your Honor, she says she needs to review it.
Oh, that's not the question. Overruled.
I didn't write a date.
No, there is no date on there, is there?
No.
Okay, let's turn the page. And that page is also in blue ink, right?
Yes.
And there is no date on that next page, is there?
That's correct.
Then let's look at the page following that. That page, where you have your left hand on, that's also in blue ink. No, 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 you turn the page, go back. That's also in blue ink, correct?
Yes.
And there is no date on there either, is there?
That's correct.
Let's turn the page. And then on the next page, that's also in blue ink, correct?
Yes.
And there's no date on that either, right?
That is correct.
The next page after that contains the initials JA, right?
Yes.
That's for Jodi Arias, correct?
Yes.
And that's also in blue ink, correct?
Yes.
And there's no date in that one, is there?
There is not.
And if you turn the page, go ahead. There's an entry for January 24th of 2008, right?
Yes.
We can then go back, turn the page once. We're looking at the entry that says JA on it, right?
Yes.
We go to the previous page, the one that you're pointing to. It does start, if I may have it back, with a word that's in quotations, right?
Yes.
Exhibit number 458 includes that particular portion of the entry in quotations, right?
Yes.
Then if we go to the previous page, at the bottom of the page, it's also in blue ink, right?
Yes.
The entry that I'm showing you now includes that last paragraph, right?
Second to last.
Second to last paragraph. Well, if you take a look at the bottom, you see that there's a word
Oh, I
that's...
apologize. You're correct.
Okay? So, in essence, what we're talking about is that the one with the word that's crossed out then travels on to the next page, and that's what's included in this entry, correct? In Exhibit 458, right?
Yes.
Along with the first page that includes the date, right?
Yes.
And the entry, or Exhibit 458, references Lonnie's baptism, right?
Yes.
Look for the admission of Exhibit 458.
No, this is going to be several pages, correct? Take the
All right, you
last
need some additional time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the noon recess at this time. Please be back in the jury room at 1:25. Remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. You are excused.
All rise.
The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down. Mr. Nurmi, you need some additional time. You may be seated in the back of the courtroom. You need some additional time?
Yes, Judge, this is several pages and excerpts have been removed.
Take it up at 1:25. We're at recess.